Welcome to For the Record, an unfiltered view on current trends and timeless advice for surviving in the aesthetics industry. Whether you're an injector, practice owner, sales rep, or marketer, it's time to set the record straight. Each week we cut through the chaos and showcase diverse perspectives and winning ideas from the best minds in the industry. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Hall, Chief Growth Officer at Aesthetic Record. Now, let's get started on this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of For the Record. And today we're going to take a deep dive into all things sales, vendor relationships, partnerships, really understanding how you can help yourself to do some really cool things in your practice with your resources. And we have with us today a true expert, a fellow industry veteran who came from the Allergan ranks, other jobs in capital equipment and devices, had a long, lustrous career there, doing a lot of really successful things, and then made a transition a few years ago to now do an independent consulting role, speaking, a best-selling author. She is all over LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every day. I see all of her content and really helping practices to hire, retain great talent, also to help talent get to these practices and to really help them make a difference and leave their mark when they're there. And so I'm excited today to welcome Danielle Cobo, who is a genius consultant doing all kinds of fun things. And she's here with us today at For the Record to share her story. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, you have a very long career in aesthetics, much like me, doing a lot of kind of different random things that have led you to this point. So I'd love to get just a quick background for our audience of where you've been, what you've been doing.
So yeah, I started my career in dental sales and then was recruited into medical aesthetics, where it was such an exciting opportunity. I really didn't know the realm of world that I had entered, but it ended up being one of the biggest blessings of my life. I started in capital equipment, where I worked with some of the top medical aesthetic devices, and then transferred in to working as a senior region manager for 7 years for one of the top aesthetic companies, leading a team for the topical aesthetics division, where we ended up having capital equipment as well. So did that for about 7 years. And then in 2020, like many people out there, went through a change and ended up leaving the corporate world and ended up starting my own business. And I work with a lot of individuals and then a lot of the companies within the aesthetic market and helping them with leadership development, sales training, and career planning. So really about how can we build a career in life that we love and thrive in aesthetic sales.
Yeah, it's interesting. All your content is really around that, like building what you love and really personal connections, which is so funny, Danielle, because that's not how I operate at all. I'm like, get it done, get in there, do the grunt work. But I think it really speaks to the fact that in this industry, people are trying to have a lifestyle. Also, all of us are mothers. When you're a mother, I think you have twins. We're all moms. We're trying to fit in, this within our life and our responsibilities. So there is a part of this, like even as a leader, you're leading a team, which is kind of like being a mom. And I'm sure you can agree to that. It's
yes,
like being a mom in many ways.
Like
so it's like I have a lot of children here, but also one at home. And this business is a baby. And that's a lot of responsibilities and it's a lot of groundwork and legwork for the people who are in charge. And it's exhausting. And so I do appreciate every day your content's always about like doing both, like leading into both sides of your life, your work and your personal, which is so hard to do. And so I think what you're putting out there in the world, by the way, I appreciate that because I need a reminder every day to do both. So thank you for that.
You're right. It's important. It's important that we are thriving in both areas. I am in 100% alignment with you that I want to get things done. I want to be effective. I want to thrive. But ultimately, why do we do it? And that's important when we're growing any business, is that we understand the why and who we're doing it for and the person that we want to become along the way.
Well, and you're kind of like me with a background in the corporate America realm, coming into medical aesthetics. So we were both in a big business helping small businesses, which is always a little bit different. And we learned to really leverage our resources, lean on people who could help us, people in different divisions, departments. I think for our medical spa colleagues, that's always not an obvious thing to do. Of like, who's in your repertoire, who's in your team of advisors that can help you in your practice to grow. And I think we share a passion for the fact that our vendor partners are partners. And so I think you and I have insight that we can share today. But I'd love to explain to people in a sense, like what partnerships mean for them in their practice, how to leverage people who are like us in these big companies that can give them resources or sales reps in their practices. Give us an idea of how you help practices think through that partnership sort of dynamic.
A lot of individuals look at kind of sales reps as, oh, they're just coming in here to sell me something. And yes, there is an element that they've got quotas, they've got numbers that they need to meet. And at the same time, there's also an opportunity to really shift their perspective. And that is their success is tied to your success. And so, and especially in aesthetic sales, I would often tell my team 90% of your job is to help a practice sell through the inventory. Only 10% of it is you actually selling the inventory in. And so really when it comes to those vendor partnerships and how can aesthetic business owners look at these sales reps more as consultants, more as business partners, and less as just a sales rep, they're going to be able to really change the dynamic of that relationship. It is challenging being a business owner because one of the biggest challenges is you're running the business and you're responsible for everybody that reports to you. You're doing the accounting, the marketing, and yes, there's elements that you have a team that is supporting you and you're delegating certain tasks to them, but ultimately everybody's looking at you. And so what would it look like if you looked at some of these vendor partnerships and said, well, they're here to support me. They're supporting you and helping you achieve your goals in the practice. So one of the things I recommend when it comes to working with your sales representative, your vendor partners, is think about the access of information that they can bring to the table. You think about these sales representatives and they go to their national sales meeting once a year where sales reps across all over the US come together and they're talking about strategies and tactics that are working in the field. They're talking about how they're able to grow their business, what's working in one practice that's not working in another practice. And how amazing would it be if you were able to think about how you can tap into that knowledge? I know one example that I have is there is a practice that's in the Midwest that every single year they do a patient event. That patient event generates $1 million in revenue each year for that one patient event. Wouldn't it be nice to know some of the specifics of what that practice is doing that has led to their success? And maybe you can take some of those strategies and tactics and apply it to your upcoming patient events.
Is that Missy Clifton in Arkansas? Because she is legendary for her $1 million patient events.
It is another practice, but she is definitely legendary for
She is.
her events.
What you just said is so poignant and so right now timely because the year's wrapped up. We are looking at national sales meetings coming up in January, February for most companies. It is a plethora of information. And if you're a practice who is like, who else out there is like me? Who else is my same size, my same challenges? Your sales rep will know that. I mean, as a sales rep at Galderma, I would think about who is also like my market, who's in Arkansas, kind of, tiny little baby market with small practices. If I can go find that other sales rep and see what they've been doing that works in their territory, I can bring it back to my people. And so I felt like it was my duty, responsibility to do that. But also practices were asking for that. Like, who is like me out there? Can I call them, connect with them? What are they doing? Your sales rep they are like a little encyclopedia of information about what's happening in the market and what's working. And I think that we don't tap into that nearly enough as a practice in any case because we think that they're salespeople, right? We think they're coming with a dollar sign on top of their head saying, buy my product, buy my product. And yes, buy it. But I think what you also said about it's their duty as well to help you pull it through and holding them accountable to that, to say, I'm happy to buy what you want me to buy. We do need the product, but I want you to connect with me about how to sell it. And it's also like our commitment to each other that you're going to help me pull this through because you brought it to me. Now help me get it out the door. And so I think that we do have a disconnect there. And how do you as a practice owner even broach that conversation with the sales rep to say, now that you sold me this thing, we're now in this together. Help me get this pulled through off the shelf.
Yeah, so some of the questions you can ask is, what are you seeing work really well among the practices that are among the same size or kind of the same phase of where they're at in the practice growth? What's working really well? I'm quantify it. I always like to put a 3 or a 5. I do this in sales training as well because I believe you can get very surface level if you're just going, oh, well, this is working really, just one. But when you say, what are 3 factors that are leading to the success of some of the practices that are in the same same like revenue generating or the same, they've been in business for 3 years, we're in business for 3 years. What's working really well? And if you quantify you're going to have them dig a little bit deep and going to 3 to 5. Okay, what's not working well? So I want to know what is working well, what is not working well. Where do you see from this outside perspective of coming into my practice? Where do you feel like the three biggest opportunities are within my practice? Another one being the practices that are just a couple steps ahead of me. What are they doing that possibly I can implement into my practice as well? So take the time. When I do sales trainings with some of these aesthetic companies, I encourage them. January is your time to sit down with the business, with the aesthetic practice business owners and get a good understanding of what their vision is for the next year. What are their practice goals? What were their challenges the previous year? We always want to look at like reflection of the previous year. What worked well last year? What didn't work well? What are three things that we want to change moving into this next year? What new treatments or services are we going to bring into this next year? What's our area of focus for this next year? And I encourage these aesthetic consultants, these sales representatives, to sit down with the business owners and truly understand what the practice owner's business goals are so that they are providing resources that align their business goals with the practice owner's business goals. And then I take it through the next step and saying, look, there's multiple ways that you can support a practice. If a practice is wanting to grow skincare in their business, for example, yes, you want to ensure that the staff is trained on the products and understanding the ingredients. Also, look at other ways that you can support that practice and helping them grow their skincare business. Perhaps it's helping them understand inventory management. Perhaps it's merchandising the skincare. Maybe it's helping the staff. I know a lot of staff doesn't want to feel like they're sales. I get that. So how can you help these staff members give more consultative assessments to the patients so that the patients are optimizing their outcomes by having services done in the office and going home with the right skincare to ensure they're getting the best results? Another way a sales representative can come in and support a staff or support the practice is helping them with their social media presence, helping them when it comes to customer service. So there's so many ways that these business owners can partner with these vendors and really look at all the different facets within the business and create a plan to grow the business.
All of that it's a hell yes for me, obviously. And I think part of it, I mean, you have a business, you know how this works. Here, there are so many things going on for me, so many competing priorities that if someone could hold me accountable to things, I'm more likely to do them. And so I think as a practice owner, if your sales rep is really part of your world, they're in there quite often, they're working with you even weekly in some cases if you're, a big practice, and they can help you with this plan to say, I'm going to come back next week and have these 4 things done, or I'm going to call you tomorrow and see if this has been done yet. I think someone to remind you of that and put you on like a project plan, if you will get it done much faster, or to give you the idea, because chances are the business owner knows what they should be doing, but to have someone else say, okay, I know what you should be doing as well, and I've thought about a way to solve your problem. Here's what I think we can do. Here's the plan. Let's work together and get this done. That is such a value added person who is just busy surviving. And even right, the holiday season's so crazy. Q4 is a maniac, just wild time for all of us. Coming off of this, Q4 thing that we've all been living in, you're so overwhelmed and overstimulated that it's like to even stop to think about growing the business now. And I just finished all of that is exhausting. And so I think having the sales rep who can be your consultant, but your planner, your helper, your project manager, your accountability partner, it's such a benefit. And guess what? They're paid to do that. You don't have to pay them separate money. You don't have to have a consultant come do it. They're getting paid to be there and buy product from you. And as long as you're buying product from them in some capacity, they're going to keep helping you. And so I think the good news is it's like a sorority. You're buying your friends. They don't have a choice. They're there to help you. And so I think leveraging them appropriately is so important. And we don't do it. We're kind of scared, I think, as a practice owner. At least when I was a rep, they were kind of scared to ask. Like, no, ask me for help. I'm here to help you. I want to help you. And with the staff training aspect as well, I know many of them will do staff training. They'll come in and do in-service days. What should you ask for in a staff training? Because I do feel like those are kind of you never know what you're going to get. Like, how do you help your sales rep to set that practice up and that event up to say, I want them to be able to sell more when they leave. Help us figure out the right words, the verbiage, the things, and not just a product pitch for 2 hours. I think it ends up being that in many cases. How do we help them make that an actual meeting?
And this would be the message that I would have for both the practice owners and the sales representatives. You definitely, as when I'm working with the sales representatives, I say it's important that the staff gets educated on the products, the science, the clinical benefits, the outcomes. A lot of times, these practices need help with selling skills. Ultimately, it'll grow the business for the practice, and then it will grow the business for the sales representative as well. Some of the trainings that are available that we used to do in the organizations that I worked was phone skill trainings. Like that's the first impression for a patient. So how can we train the staff to, when somebody calls in and asks a particular question about a laser or an injectable, how can credential the provider, differentiate ourselves from this practice versus the one down the street, and get the patient to book the appointment right then and there? Wouldn't it be nice if you had somebody that could come in and teach your staff how to approach those conversations immediately just over the phone? That's what your vendor reps can do.
And I think that can also help too with even the marketing aspect of, if you're texting out a text blast or an email blast, what are things that we've seen work and not work? But I think what you hit on there about the phone skills part is so important. Every person in the practice should know about the products. I used to be so just, the word probably shocked. I would go to a training or help facilitate a training somewhere and they would not have the front desk person come. I'm like, the person who should hear this the most is the person at the front desk. They are the welcoming committee. They're the ones who are going to be talking about the product most before they get into the room. Once they're in the room, they're a captive audience, right? We've had them in the room, the door shut, we have them where we want them. But to get them in the door, the front desk person should be so knowledgeable and able to assess and recommend and help guide them down the path of what they should have. I think of them more as a concierge, not really I hate to use the word front desk, but a concierge to that patient. I feel like they're the ones who need to be in those trainings, even if it's an injection training day. Let them hear how the trainer talks about the product and how they talk about with the patient, what the outcomes could be and what to look for, the signs of improvement, etc. I think they are oftentimes forgotten about and neglected in those trainings. And perhaps the most important person in the practice is that concierge role. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like we overlook them so often.
I agree with you. Ultimately, when the provider provides the recommendation, it's going to hold a lot of weight, but your staff, your employees support the process. They're the ones that when the patient has questions, okay, the provider has recommended the treatment or the service or the product in the room. Now that patient has left, they're now at the front, they're checking out and they've got questions. You want your concierge to be just as knowledgeable on anything that you're providing in your office so they can ask questions right then and there, because that can be the deciding factor for somebody of whether they say, oh, I'll think about it, or yes, I'm going to do it right now.
Well, and we spend a lot of time talking about consultations. I mean, if you come to Aesthetic Next, everyone always submits an abstract talking about consultations. I swar it's like everyone wants to do it. I think it's algorithmic. Personally, I think there's an algorithm to it. There's ways you should do it. There's a process for it. And there's just ways to get people to your point, not just the why, but the how. Like not what is the product and what does it do, but how do I use it in this consultation or in this conversation? Do you have any good tidbits for us if we're thinking about not wanting to be a salesman, which by the way, we're all salesmen. We all sell every day. If you have a child, you're selling to your kid every day to eat their vegetables or to go to bed on time. You're selling to your spouse, your friends. We're all selling. So I think that's just get that out of your head. We all sell. But how do you help practices or how do you look through the consultation process and dissect what's working, what's not working, and what's the recommendation to get it to be more effective next time?
Gosh, you're so right. I feel like my kids are the biggest negotiators.
Yeah.
I learned my sales techniques from them.
They're like little terrorists. I feel like we do not negotiate with terrorists in my house. I say that to my child all the time. He's like, Mom, I'm not a terrorist. I'm like, but you are. You're holding me hostage in my own house that I pay for.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Consultations, I believe that a lot of times people don't want to come across as sales, and I don't want anybody to come across as sales. Let's remove the fact that you're taking the sales cap off, and what you're doing as a provider is you're educating your patients on what's going to get them the best outcomes and help them achieve the goals to what they want to achieve. So when there's a consultation, the biggest advice I would give is put a mirror in front of the patient. Tell me, what are the biggest changes that you've seen in your skin or the changes that you've seen in your facial structure over the past 10 years? And they'll start to point out exactly what it is. They'll start to look at it. But unless that mirror's in front of them, they're kind of going off of memory. So, and we'll talk about too, when it comes to consultations, let's do a good, better, and best when it comes to their options. Good, let's say, is we're going to do a neurotoxin and we're going to do a little bit of filler. Maybe better is we're going to do neurotoxin filler and we're going to do a laser. And then best might be we're going to do, the full shebang treatment. But it's important that when you are in front of a patient that you're asking them questions to better understand where do they see their problem areas? What are the outcomes that they want to achieve? Is there something particular event that maybe they want to achieve their outcomes by? Maybe they're attending a wedding, or they're going to be seeing, they're going to their 20-year reunion, whatever it is. But you got to, the more that you ask questions, and this is same as sales training. I always, when I'm doing sales trainings for these sales representatives, it's not about listing off features and benefits of a particular product. It's understanding what the customer's pain points, challenges, and opportunities are. Same with the patient. What are their challenges? Where do they see the areas of their concern? And then offering them solutions to help them achieve their goals.
I was listening to a podcast recently and it was talking about Gucci and it was talking about, I'm a big believer in the good, better, best as well. I think whatever you come in for isn't even on that list. It's like the number one starting point. So at minimum, we go back to that, but ideally we'd at least do the good. And they talked about at Gucci, they put a $2,000 handbag next to a $10,000 handbag. Because at first, like $2,000 for a handbag, really? But then your brain starts thinking about $10,000. It's like, oh, that $2,000 is a bargain. I'll get the $2,000 handbag. It's the same idea of like having a Michael Kors, a Louis Vuitton or a Birkin. Like the Birkin's so expensive, they're like, oh, Louis Vuitton's not so bad. There's this idea like psychologically that when we give people choices, they will tend to gravitate toward the middle. And if the middle is a good idea and a good choice for them, then great. We all win here. But I think there is this positioning thing that we don't often do. And it takes a bit of a skilled person in that moment to kind of put those packages together. I think that's why a lot of people have the person go out of the room and the person comes in that's just a consultant for selling. Like in plastic surgery centers, it's like, we'll get the sales girl to come in now after I've done the consultation. There's probably a reason for that because it is a bit on the fly, hard to put together. But I think what you mentioned there is so critical that you've got to give people options. And I think also remaining authentic in it and being transparent about what you cannot do or what you can do, because it's never a good idea. And this happens all the time. Oh, yes, it's going to take 10 years off your face. We don't know that. We have no idea if that's true. We're going to tell them it's our best tool in our toolbox, our best effort. But I think there's a place where if you're the practice owner, you worry about disputes, people coming back, wanting refunds, just the social media fodder about that if things are overpromised, underdelivered. So I think there's a delicate balance there, like what you can and can't promise as a consultant in that room with your patient, and then being able to actually deliver on what you say you can do. And I think that's where we get in a lot of traps too, is I'm going to promise you all these great things, but can I actually deliver it? Is my skill set good enough? Do I have the right tools in my toolbox? Do I have time? Do you have the budget for it? I think we just have to, there's a place there to take a step back and say, am I being authentic and real here? And if I'm not, fix that before you keep going forward, because no one wants to give refunds away, especially not a $5,000 service. That's never a good idea. But if those things happen, how do you manage that part? If I do have a bad day, I do overpromise, underdeliver. How do you help the sales people, the practice, everyone involved kind of work through that and do better next time?
So there's a framework that we use in sales that I believe is a framework that could be used in really any situation that you've got a difficult conversation, and that is LAIR. So it's listen to their concerns, acknowledge their feelings, because whether you agree or disagree with the patient, it's important to acknowledge their feelings. So what I'm hearing you saying is X, Y, Z, and then repeat back to what you're hearing saying, because that's going to clarify you're either hearing correctly, or you're hearing what they're trying to communicate, or it's an opportunity to follow up with a question. Then it's listen, acknowledge, explore, asking some questions, and then respond with the solution. So LAIR is a framework that I use in sales, and it's extremely helpful when you've got a situation like a customer is upset about a particular product that didn't deliver correctly, or they want to change sales reps for any reason. But it's a framework that can be used in any application. So I would say take that approach, and it's going to really help you in navigating through those conversations.
Yeah, I want to add an E to that. I like that framework. Here we are big believers on, even if we're not wrong, apologize for the situation. It's like, I'm not saying that I did it wrong. but I'm saying that it sucks that it's happening to you. Like, it sucks that you're going through this. I hate that this is happening. I wouldn't say sucks clearly, but I think there's a part of it. It's like when you go in for a refund, after Christmas, you get a gift you don't want, you're going in for a refund. You kind of got to psych yourself up for it, right? It's going to be a fight with the person at the cashier station. Can you get the refund or not? Do I meet the terms? Do I not meet the terms? Is it 30 days, not 30 days? Like, you're psyched up and you're kind of heated about the whole thing before it even starts. If someone says immediately, gosh, I hate this is happening to you, I want to get this fixed for you. I don't know how quite yet. I'm going to ask a few questions here, but I want this to get resolved. People are immediately they're disarmed. They're not so freaked out and upset and mad about things. So we discuss that here a lot. I may not have made any problem for you. It may not be my fault at all, but to empathize and apologize for the situation happening, I think is such an important part of it, especially for a patient. They want to be heard, to your point. They want you to listen to them. They want you to know that you messed up. Whether you did or not, it's not important. And if you win, you actually lose. We discuss that here a lot too. If we are going to win the argument, we've actually lost the customer. We've lost their good faith in us. Mm-hmm. So it's like winning is not important. I think in a sales role, if you're going to be a great salesperson, you've got to learn how to be a great refund, dispute, angry customer handler too, because they do go hand in hand. If you're a great salesperson, they're going to buy it, have buyer's remorse at home, come back and freak out. How do you get them to stay with it and say, you know what, this is great for you. Look at your results. Look at your before and after. That's why I think pictures are so important too. If you don't take pictures, how do you have anything to stand on? If you can't show the patient what's actually occurred in their skin, it's hard to prove that, because to your point, they're going off memory. They forget what they look like before. It's like lip filler. You forget you had small lips last week, and now they're huge. Like, you just forget all that. Your frame of reference shifts. So I think there's a part of it where we've got to teach folks to take the knife in the gut, at least temporarily, to make the client feel comfortable and continuing on with the question and answer session that you want them to have with the whole acknowledged situation, the exploring situation. So I'm not sure your thoughts on that, but I'm a big believer in the empathy part.
I would also add too, thank them. Thank them for bringing it to your attention. Because what often happens is a patient is frustrated about a particular outcome or situations that have happened. And a lot of times what they'll do is they either just won't come back, or what will happen is they'll just go to social media and they'll just spread the word. So the fact that they're coming to you and they have the courage to come to you and say, hey, this didn't work out. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming back and giving me the opportunity to work through this together and find something that works for you, for both of us, for you. It's important that you get the best outcome that you do, and let's talk through it together. So I think that even just thanking them, then do the listen, acknowledge, explore, respond is beneficial. And what I've learned in sales is that oftentimes the customers who have been the most upset that I've listened to, that I've acknowledged their feelings, that I've provided solutions for, have ended up being the most loyal customers in the long run. But it's super helpful too that they've come and they've shared that information with me. I can't, especially in management, like as a sales manager, I can't fix anything that I'm not aware of.
I agree. I think this is, in the consultation, you have a moment there where you can demonstrate that to the patient of whatever the results are from this, from our treatment today, whatever happens. I think you have to let the patient know you can come back to me. You can come tell me if there's an issue. You can text me, call me, email the practice, whatever it is. I want to hear your feedback. If there is a concern, I want you to let me know. I want to make it right for you. People will buy things if they feel like there's a safety net there, or that there's a way for them to be heard after the sale. And whether that's a check-in that you do an automated text, a week after, a day after, whatever that looks like for you, I agree that the biggest risk you have is that they don't come back. If they don't like the result and they don't come back, they don't tell you, I'd rather hear no than hear nothing. And I think you have to have people who feel in that room that they can tell the patient, no matter what goes on, I want you to come back to me, and feel confident in saying that, and then be able to actually solve the problem when they come back in. I think a patient will take more risk with you, not risk health-wise, like mentally, financially, more risk with you if they know there is a place for them to come back and get help if they need it. And I don't think we often spend enough time on that in the consultation. At the end of it, of like, I can promise you that if you go through with this, we are here for you, whatever the results are. Because what you also don't want is for your community to hear that you're not good. If your patients don't come back to you, they're going to somebody else saying, "Oh, that Danielle was terrible. Look, I've got a dropped brow. My lips not working. I look terrible." And then that hurts you also in the long run, reputation-wise, with your colleagues. God forbid you'll get a job at that practice at some point. And they think you're terrible. Like, I think it's just reputation cleanup in general. You've got to be willing to solve the problems that you may or may not have caused. Regardless, be there to solve them for them. So, big believer in the same thing. Okay, brings me to the next question about this topic. If you're the practice owner, and this is one of my hot buttons, Danielle, that I get real heated about, so I'll try to stay calm. I do not love when people say, I let my people buy all the products. We have everything that we could ever have in the whole industry on our shelves. I think that is absolute just blasphemy. I mean, good Lord, how can you afford that? As a practice owner, how do you educate your staff, or dictate is not the good word, but it probably is, dictate to your staff that we're going to use these 4 things, these 8 things, whatever that is, inventory wise, because I can't control inventory for everyone's products in the whole entire industry. How do you help them understand that you can make that call? And it's okay that they have to choose Juvederm versus Restylane or Restylane versus like, it's okay. It all works. It's all good. I know that's a very tense conversation. So how do you help practice owners get the gumption to do that or make that choice?
Oh, this is such a good question because, especially coming from skincare, this was a huge challenge that we ran into when working with practices. And I remember this TED talk that was given, and it was this woman who did a TED talk on choices. And what she did research on jams. And so she had a little display set up, and what happened is there was over 20 different jams, and what jams is like jelly. And what the research showed is the more options, the least decisive people became. And so while I believe that options are beneficial, like I wouldn't recommend that somebody just says one product line, it's beneficial to maybe have 2 or 3. Ensuring like it narrowing it down and saying this is the reason why we chose this particular brand or product that we carry. Now, there are some practices that advertise that they have all of the brands of an injectable or filler or a skincare brand, but ultimately, once the patient's in the door, a lot of times they'll always lean them towards one direction, and that's for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's truly they believe that that is the best product on the market. It could be that they're getting a higher profit because their cost of goods is down because they've partnered with that particular aesthetic company when it comes to their portfolio of products. So there's multiple reasons, but yeah, I do strongly believe that, especially in skincare, that if there's too many options, it's too confusing. You want to align yourself with a couple top brands. One of the tasks that we would do when working with aesthetic practices is we would pull their inventory report and let's look at what are your top performing SKUs amongst each of the brands and the consistently that they're selling. Does it make sense to have 6 different retinols from 6 different brands, or does it make sense to have 2 retinols from these 2 different brands because that's what we're selling the most? And knowing that every single inch of your merchandising display has a cost associated to it. And that goes into like when sales reps can come in and they can do inventory training, they can do merchandising, they can do all sorts of things to help you out through that process.
When it goes back to where we started this conversation of, if you want to partner with a vendor, you've got to partner as well. And if you tell the vendor, I want you to come in and help me get everything aligned and fixed and done, but I'm going to also have 24 of you, the conversation isn't quite as fruitful. I think you've got to make a choice at some point. If you want to really go in with somebody and partner with them, partner with them. If you want them to show up for you, show up for them. So I think that's kind of one part of it. The other part of it's what you said about just cost of goods sold. Economies of scale and scope dictate that you have to buy a few things to get better deals, discounts, etc. You can't buy a little bit of a lot of things because you don't matter to anyone. And I think in this industry, more than any other one I've ever worked in, you have to matter here to get things that you want, like to be the first person in the queue to get the new product or to go to the ad boards. You've got to kind of matter. And I think if you can't buy things at a volume scale, you're going to matter far less. And sometimes that means putting more eggs in a basket than you would otherwise. But you also don't need them all. And I think your staff gets confused too. My goodness, think about all the fillers that we have now, and they all kind of do the same thing. Like the G prime being a little different here, a little different there, the viscosity being a little different here, a little different there. It's not game changing. At the end of the day, I mean, I sold it and told you it was, but really it's not. It's not game changing. How do we limit what we tell our providers that they can use and educate them on why those things actually work and who's a patient type, what's the correction that we're going to give, et cetera. Because in the moment of the good, better, best, for instance, knowing the pricing, knowing what you have in your toolbox, it's so much faster and easier for the provider to have that discussion and having to think about, I've got 86 different filler products. Which one could I use here? I could use this one here. I get a discount for this one. I have Aspire points on this one. I have Alley points on this one. I have experience points on this one. It becomes a cluster of an algorithm to figure out. And I think it just is really, really hard. So I'm all about picking a few horses in your race and going all in with them. But I think skincare, more than any other place, it is critical because that paralysis analysis is so real in skincare. And it's the ingredients, the directions, the AM, the PM, all that is so confusing anyway. You got to limit the choices for people or they're never going to be able to make a decision. It's just they're overwhelmed with it.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, you said specifically about aligning yourself with a company, especially in this industry, because as we're finding more and more over the years, and what we've noticed is a lot of these top aesthetic companies are purchasing other companies. So now what used to be solely just injectable company now has a skincare line, now has non-invasive body contouring, now has a laser, now has plastic surgery side. So it's got all these different divisions, and what they're doing is they're doing a portfolio. And so they're saying the more you buy from us, the more of a discount that you're going to get on the product. So again, yes, it goes into really understanding too, like your cost of goods, and is there value in having multiple products depending on the patients and what their immediate needs are? Absolutely. At the same time, also look at areas that you can streamline your business as well.
I think.
Skincare, hands down, no more than three.
Oh yeah, even for me, I know the answers. I'm like, this is overwhelming in here, but I think capital equipment's a big one too. You mentioned, this body contouring and such. It's a big thing now. Everyone's buying. We all buy lasers. We all have devices, and those reps tend to kind of come in, drop it off, and you never see them again. We have. There's an account manager in some cases that comes in and actually helps you with the business. But how do you have those discussions with your laser reps to say, I want to buy this thing from you. I think it's a great device, but I want you to stay involved here. I need you to stay involved in my business and help me to pull this thing through to get people on, to get people to use it. How do I help launch it? Like, what do we do for a launch plan, a training plan? How do you hold those guys accountable? Because in many cases they're not W-2s, right? They're trying to sell devices. I get what they're trying to do. You got to hustle. But what does
Yeah.
that discussion look like, and how do you hold their feet to the fire?
Oh yes, because I sold capital equipment, so I understand. And that's one of the reasons I understand there are companies out there where you're looking at two capital equipment devices and you're deciding why should I go with one over another. One of them has a consumable, and sometimes that can be viewed as a negative, and sometimes it doesn't. The reality is that one of the reasons why these capital equipment companies have a consumable in is that somebody is tied to that number. So again, it goes back into if you're doing more treatments, you're then going through more consumables, which is tied to their quota. So they want you to succeed because they will succeed as well. And so so when you start to look at consumables as like, this is my insurance to ensure that we're going to be successful and doing this treatment plan. But I do agree with you when it comes to looking at any capital equipment device. I want to go into this knowing that I have a laid out plan within the first 90 days of how I'm going to train the staff, how it's going to be marketed to marketing, particular promotions. Are we going to do an event day? What does that look like? How are you going to set me up for success so that I'm not just having this clunky device delivered and not have anything to implement and execute to be successful?
I love that consumables are insurance. I could not agree more. I'm like, thank God they launched consumables, because otherwise there's no reason to come back. I mean, that's forcing that vendor to have to stay with you and connected with you. Otherwise, they've done their job. They gave you the device. Now, good luck, sister, and they go. I mean, that was, when I first started in injectables, that was the thing that people did. Now there is a reason to come back in. I love the fact that you're now aligned. Your interest and their interests are the same because it's quota. We're all trying to do this together. So I love that idea. But question for you too, thinking about devices, and I know we got to wrap up here in a few, but if I am launching something in the practice as a practice owner, I bought a new filler line, a new skincare line, a new device. How do I ensure that my staff in those first really critical 90 days buys into it also? Do I hold them accountable? I want you to see 6 patients who need this, this treatment. Let's do a staff in service day. What do you recommend for me to get my people on board to actually sell this thing, whatever this thing is, to my patient base?
That's a great question. One of them being is asking your staff, where do you see this particular treatment fitting in to our practice? Can you think of maybe 3 patients that you can think of where you believe that this treatment is going to be exactly what they're looking for? I do believe that there's value in not only, again, it goes back to have a staff training, not only on the clinical of that product, the science behind it, because there are some patients that are going to ask very clinical questions. And there's going to be some patients that may not, just depends on the personality type. But that's a whole nother conversation because I'm certified in DISC. But so understanding, like, it's important that they understand the clinical, but also how do we communicate this to the patients? And what questions can we ask? What questions does the staff have? And then also too, in these trainings, and I know that this is super uncomfortable, let me just tell you, sales reps hate it too. But role
Role play.
play.
I knew you were going to
You
say
knew
role
I was
play.
going to say it. You knew I was going to say, I always used to joke around and say, hey, look, if I'm going to go into an office and I'm going to say, I'm going to get the elephant in the room, we're going to role play. And you're going to roll your eyes and it's going to feel uncomfortable. And you're going to, this anxious fear is going to come up. And know that no matter how long you have been doing sales, we have all felt it before. Ultimately, this is a safe place within this staff training for you to ask questions, for you to practice your pitch, for us to practice with each other so that when these questions come up, you can confidently answer them because you've done it before.
I love role play. I'm like, please, someone give me a chance to role play. Because if you have the question as the role player, so does everyone else in the room. We all have the same question. But if you have the cojones to be the one in the front of the room trying to answer it, then good for you. And I think what you just said is the most important part because you've done it before. You have wired your brain to know the answer. You practice it. You've heard the words coming out of your mouth. You've had to think on the spot and come up with the idea or the answer. It is so valuable, and I know it's uncomfortable. People hate it. They hate it here too. Like my team would never. They just hate role play. But it is such a great way to practice and ingrain in your mind what you should say. That even if you hate it and it sucks, still we do a lot of things every day that we don't like to do, right? Danielle, I do things every day that I hate doing, but I do them because they have to be done. This is one of those things, and it does work. And I think they need to practice in the moment, even at the chair. Like when you're with the patient and they're with you and you're trying to inject and talk about things, how do you educate as you're injecting? I think there's part of it too that just like if you're on stage and you're doing a lecture, you have to be able to inject and talk. In the room, it's so uncomfortable if they don't say anything to me and they're injecting me. Like, give me an idea about the product, what's happening, what should I expect? You can discuss adverse events, that whole thing about if you have a problem, call me. Please text me. Make sure you come back in. Use that time. They are a passive audience sitting in your chair. Use that time to continue educating and talking through things. And you have to role play that because otherwise it's hard to learn to do both at the same time and to do it well. I know it is. But role play, I'm all in. Do the role play.
And also too, like think about this is something that I see in a lot of aesthetic practices too, where the patient comes in and the provider is, you want to have small talk, absolutely. You want to connect with somebody on a personal level, but also I love it when I sit in the chair and the provider is educating me on the latest treatments that are coming up, the skincare. They're asking me about questions. Hey, it was summertime and it was really humid in Florida. Now it's starting to get into the winter season. What products are you currently using? Have you noticed any changes in your skincare? It's the same as when I go to my hairstylist. I want to sit in the chair and I want to be educated on what shampoos, conditioners, hair products are going to give me the outcome that she's doing in the salon. So as soon as you take that perspective and saying, I'm not selling, I am educating my patients on what is going to get them the best outcome so they're feeling confident from the inside out. That is your time.
Well, my last big question for you, because this is going to be a doozy, Danielle, a doozy question. If I'm the practice owner, I've listened to this today, thinking about my selling, educating, my staff, etc., and I'm going to go hire some new people next week. What do I look for? What is the assessment that I should be thinking through? Or how do I find out who is going to be able to do these things in the practice? Is it an on-site interview? Is it job shadowing? What are things, because I know you are big into the career aspect of all of it. That's kind of one of the places that you really, really shine. How do I think through that as a practice owner to get the right talent in the front door?
Ooh, this is such a good question because I've conducted hundreds of interviews. I've hired several people and built high performing teams. And the first question that I would ask that provider is, what are your core values? What is the culture among your team? How do you want your practice to be represented? Because do I believe that experience is valuable? Absolutely, I do. At the same time, I am going to hire more off of character because I can train a lot. And again, so can your vendor reps. Your vendor reps could be great resources to train your staff. But I want to understand, how does this person fit within the practice? So when I was in sales, I would look for three things. I would look for what were the immediate needs of my territory. What were the immediate needs of my team? Can I bring in a new skill set? And then my other one was time. And that was, can I sit in a car with somebody for 2 days and do a field co-travel and actually enjoy my time with them? So the way that you can apply those same principles when it comes to hiring for your team, what are the immediate needs of that particular role? Is there a certain skill set that's needed? Is there a certain experience level that's needed? what are the immediate needs of your team? And, you want to ensure that each person is bringing in a new skill set. And then also, would you enjoy spending time with them all day? Because oftentimes you're spending more time at work than you are with your family. So it's important that you enjoy the people that you work with. Understand that there is so much that you can train when it comes to the nuances of the job. So hire for character.
I love it. I'm a high DC. We are big DISC people here. We look at teams and look at the DISC for the team and say, what are you missing? You're missing an S. You're missing an I. I think if you're not using an assessment in your practices, get one now, assess your team and find out what the gap is. Because if you have all Ds on a team, you are totally screwed. You need somebody who has some empathy and some feeling in there to help balance it out. We have that problem here. It's like, that team is all Ds. No wonder they're all cranky. I think you've got to think through who's on your team. And I think what you mentioned about if they fit or don't fit is important. Like, I do our second interview here, and the second interview with me is, do you fit this business or not? I don't ask you about, tell me about a time you did XYZ. It's not that at all. It's a conversation about our company, about us, about them, what they believe in, their core values. And then the third interview is like more of the grilling kind of thing. But I want to know before I waste time on that third interview that they belong here. If they belong here despite skill and ability, I will continue on. If they don't, there's no point. Like, there's no point in them interviewing anymore with us because they're not going to fit in here. I think the fit in, the job fit part, it's so critical. I love that you said that. And you mentioned vendor partners. When you have a new hire, invite them all in to train. Do a full day of training with your vendor partners. Make it a formal thing and have them come at a certain time, a structured learning event. They want to come in your practice. They're dying to have a reason to come back in and see you. Give them one and let them also help you with your new hires at the same time. It's a genius way that we all get to win. It's a win-win for everyone involved. So I think vendor partners are such a critical part of the new hire process if you're a provider in a practice. I just think it's so important. But with all that, we're wrapping up here, and I want to make sure everyone knows to go buy your book because I'm going to go buy it as soon as the podcast is over. So tell us a little bit about your book, about what you're doing next, and how to find you on social media.
Yeah, so my book is Unstoppable Grit, Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals. And what the reader will find is really, again, how to get clarity on what you want in your career and build a career and life that you love. If you're experiencing burnout, which I know a lot of business owners do, there's 3 chapters in there on how to overcome burnout. And you'll probably relate to a lot of the stories because a lot of the stories that are woven through the book come from my experience working in aesthetic sales for 2 different companies. And there's a section, so the flow of the book is there's a story, the learning lessons along the way, and then practical advice that you can apply to your life, whether you're working for corporate or you're a business owner, because I've worked in both realms and there's some lessons that can be shared from both experience.
I can't wait to get it. And so tell us how to find you as well. Website, social media handles, all the things.
So DanielleCobo.com is my website, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well, and as among any social media platform. I'm across the board, but Danielle Cobo, C-O-B-O.
And you do, again, the hiring process, helping with the training staff, finding out where your gaps are as a practice owner. Really, you do the whole gamut of consulting. So I think if you're looking for somebody who can really come alongside you, team up with you, and help build your practice, build your hiring processes. Also, as a person who wants to get hired somewhere, to find out how to be great talent, to be attractive for a potential practice, Danielle's your girl. So I love what you're doing on LinkedIn. I love all the content you're putting out. So keep doing it. I can't wait to get the book, and hopefully we'll see you around more often in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been great having you on today. Thank you for coming on For the Record and sharing your story. And we will see you guys all next week with another episode of For the Record. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of For the Record. This podcast is not intended to provide legal or medical advice. It's for entertainment, education, and information purposes only. For more information on this week's guest or to get started with Aesthetic Record, email us at info@aestheticrecord.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more fresh perspectives on disrupting the status quo and surviving in the aesthetics industry.